I think three of the best questions in life are: what am I proud of? What am I grateful for? And what am I excited about? The leader's job is to look past who someone is to see who they could become. Most of our biggest regrets in life are preceded by a series of unwise decisions. Before you learn to walk, before you learn to ride a bike, before you learn to write, before you learn to read, somebody in your life said,
Before we jump into this episode, I'd love to invite you to be a part of the community where you can listen to more content to help you be a smarter, stronger, and better equipped, successful leader. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I would love and appreciate your support. It's amazing to me to watch the community grow and read all of your comments each and every week. I can't wait to go on the journey with you. Thank you so much, and it means the world to me. Welcome to the Impact Driven Leader podcast with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, man, I am joined by a friend who we've had a very interesting getting to know each other. Finally met each other earlier this year, Jordan Montgomery. Let me share a little bit about Jordan. So Jordan is a business owner. He's a speaker. He's a coach. He is an author. When this releases, his book, The Art of Encouragement, will be available. So you can go buy that. But more importantly, he's an encourager. He's a dad. He is a friend. He is a husband. He is a person who has this smile, this spirit about him that always walks into a room and aims to bring out the best in others. That's what I've seen and encouraged from him to me. I've seen that happen in others' lives. And as I got to know Jordan, and I think I've shared this with you and I'll share it again now, I knew him from afar. I knew him from Instagram. And as I was starting this impact-driven leader brand, as I was starting doing what I was doing, and my website designer was going through, and it's like, hey, who are people that are kind of, I'm like, I don't know. I started following this Jordan guy. And I kind of like what he does. And then a mutual friend of ours, John Rulin, I said, hey, do you know this Jordan guy? And he goes, oh, yeah, he's great. And it just has been one of those things now over a couple of years, have gotten to be friends. And I can now say that you're a person that is in my circle of working together, whether it's through stuff that we do with the Maxwell companies, whether it's just being on each other's podcasts, whether it's you connecting with people to speak at the Impact Summit, July 29th and 30th, just next week. Man, you have served me. That's what I know about Jordan. Can I share one last thing? This is one last thing. This is meaningful to me. This is meaningful to me. I don't know how meaningful it is to you. I know it is. Jordan chose to be a dad to two girls. That to me is also tells his character. I have two brother-in-laws who made that choice as well, to be dads to a girl and a son. And that means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to them. And, just it was about a year ago now. No, not even. Just a little bit ago.
yeah, that's good memory. June 16th.
Yep.
Yeah.
Adopted and Audrey and Claire. So that's what I got to say. How's that?
Bro, such an honor to be with you, man. Thanks for having me. I so much appreciate your friendship. Have a ton of respect for you and Kelly and the way that you choose to live and lead and impact others and serve. And you're just one of the most abundant, gracious. I mean, it's crazy how often your name pops up in my world. It's like whether I'm, at an event or talking with friends on a podcast, and I just think it's the echo of your impact. You and Kelly have served well and you've added value to people. And so just because of that, man, it's cool to hear the echo. It's cool to hear about the work that you're doing. And every time I hear it, I'm like, yes, I know. Like my friend Tyler is crushing life and taking care of people. And so thanks for the friend you've been to me, and thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah. Let's talk about your book. We're talking about your book because I want people to read your book. I mentioned to you, I read it last night in preparing for this, and it was very convicting to me. And to me, that's a good thing. That's a good thing because it's not convicting that, I need to share this with others. It's convicting internally, like, you got some work to do. Lead us, for the audience that maybe isn't familiar with you, who hasn't maybe heard the other podcasts where you've been on. How did the art of encouragement come into your life? Go back to the beginning for us.
Yeah, well, like a lot of people listening, I went through some really hard seasons of life. And to know encouragement is to also know pain. So you have to know the other side of it, right? Because I believe when you're in a really broken season, when you're in the valley, encouragement just means a little more. It's like if you have no money, $10 means more than if your bank account is just completely full. And so we've all been through a broken season. I went through a really broken season in my life, 27 years old, Tyler. Some listening might know this story. There's probably many who don't. I got fired from a Fortune 100 financial firm. It was very public. Someone on my team took a test. I didn't report it. Beyond that, I just wasn't dotting the I's, crossing the T's. It was no major infraction. It wasn't anything malicious or intentional, but I had been just careless and casual in my leadership journey. And eventually that caught up with me. And my supervisor said, hey, you need to go find somewhere else to work. You can still be in the industry. You can work for another firm. You just can't work here because I don't trust your character. It's really hard, man. I lost a great deal of money. I was involved in some real estate deals that went sideways as a result of my firing. They weren't structured properly. Major hit to my ego. It was incredibly public. It was a big company. I had done a lot of work in the company. So they sent out a company-wide email with my name on it. So you can imagine just the shame and embarrassment. That was painful. And really it was just because my identity was in my achievement and my success. It was really in what I was doing instead of who I was. And so for all of those reasons, it rocked me from the inside out. And I just had some people who met me in that valley season who were radically generous, incredibly authentic, really caring. And I just realized, okay, there's an art to this. There's a science to this. This isn't just Pollyanna positive and kumbaya. I think too many times we overestimate our ability to encourage people. I've overestimated my ability to encourage people. And I also think this book and The Art of Encouragement speaks to the most basic human need, which is the need to feel known or seen. We all want to belong to something. We want to know that our lives have purpose and they matter. And I had some people when I was in the darkest, most broken period of my life remind me that my life has purpose, my life matters. And they made me feel seen and known and valued and important. I know pain, but I also know the art of encouragement because people showed it to me. So that's why we wrote this book.
As you talk about the descent into that valley, as a person of faith, as I am myself, I think of Samson. Samson took a descent into his fall, and it wasn't just immediate. It was one step by another step by another step. And so I know there's people listening in that are in business that maybe you're in a season where things are starting to get a little tighter. There's this temptation to where all right, I can just make this work. What are some of those examples that maybe in that season that started to be steps that ended up leading you to that place that compromised your character?
That is a great question. And it's probably a question that I don't get enough, right? Because we can all relate to the big thing that we did. Most of us have a thing that we did. And it's oh yeah, this is what I did. It's what did you do? Oh, I did that thing. I made that mistake. But the reality is there was a bunch of little things that led up to the big thing. So yes, I got fired. And yes, there was this decision where, someone else took a test and I decided not to report it, et cetera, right? Before that, though, Andy Stanley says it this way. He says, most of our biggest regrets in life are preceded by a series of unwise decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not immoral. They're not wrong. They're just unwise. And I think for me, Tyler, I started to allow money and reputation and winning and achievement to get too much of my attention. It felt too good. I started to kind of live for those things and love them more before God ever intended us to love them. And I was reading the word this morning in Matthew 16, I think 16:24 says, if you're to follow me, you got to deny yourself. Jesus said to his disciples, right, if you're going to follow me, you got to deny yourself. Dude, I was doing anything but. I was living for me. I was at the center of my world. It was all about me. And I don't think God caused it, but I think he allowed it. I think he's just like, hey, man, I called you to more than this. I made you for more. I'm not going to let you live a life where you're just self-absorbed and you're so focused on winning. So if you're listening to this and you're running really, really hard and fast, and winning is getting your attention, and maybe you're not connected to the right people. I'm kind of coming at this from a faith bent, Tyler.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
just
it's
being
great.
authentic. So I hope that's
Yeah.
okay. Like for me, man, I wasn't reading my Bible at 27. I wasn't plugged into any kind of spiritual community. I didn't have mentors. I wasn't asking questions. Like I was the smartest person in every room because it felt good and my ego loved that, you know? So those were all they should have been red flags. If any of those things are happening to you, if you're the smartest person in every room, if you're never cracking your Bible, maybe you're not a person of faith. You're like, I've never cracked. Like, just try it out. Like you might not know God, but He knows you. And so I just challenge you, like, man, go to His Word. That's how He speaks to us. Try to get involved in a community. Have some mentors. Allow some people to pour into you. Go teach somebody. The best way to learn is to teach. Go mentor someone. Add value to another person's life. Those are all things that I wasn't doing that should have been red flags to me, and they weren't. So in the descent, you talked about the descent. What was life like? That's what life was like heading into the valley.
I want to stay there just for a moment more. You talk about that and whether, I've gone through some of that, right? And I've gone through those seasons, right? Whether you're the smartest one in the room or you make yourself to be, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I probably wasn't,
Yeah,
but I
but I
thought I
mean,
was.
or you present yourself in a way. For me, I've realized through this last growth and journey in my life, that was the armor of my insecurity. Like I was afraid of what value I had to offer. And so I ask, as you think about that, and we're just having a conversation here, man, how much of that, or just asking you to think about it, was that tied into an insecurity that drove you to mask whatever that value, the worthiness, those things? Was it, you mentioned Mike Foster a little bit ago, was it answering a primal question?
Yes. So glad you said that because I talked to Mike maybe 6 months ago. I had Mike on our podcast and I shared that with him. The primal issue was I had a parent in my life who sort of lived a double life for many years. And that caused issues for me of rejection. So the primal question is, am I worthy? I want to be accepted. I want to know that my life matters. Again, it gets back to I want to feel known. I want to feel seen. I want to know that my life matters because I had someone in my life for many, many years who I was very close to, who, by the way, I have a great relationship with now. I mean, God's redeemed and restored so much of that. But there was this hole in my heart over like, am I enough? Am I worthy? And so the way that I masked that or medicated was I would just win. And then, if I won, if I was at the top of the production report, or if I got the pat on the back from my supervisor, or if I had a certain number of dollars in my bank account, which, gosh, sounds so shallow right now. But it was, for me at the time, it was like, okay, I'm worthy. I have value. My life matters. And I'm not going to feel rejected here. And so, yeah, man, I think we all go through something really tough, which creates this primal question of, am I insert whatever? And then it can manifest itself in unhealthy behaviors.
I mean, for me, it was based upon insecurity, and to me, the question I wanted, and circling back to earlier stuff in life, whether it was from the challenge, I know how I masked it, right? It was through intensity. That's what I chose, and I see so many people in the business world, right? And people that are even performance coaches and athletes and everyone else. I talked to another. Well, he's an Iowa resident, about so many coaches at the professional level that their insecurity drives them to be so intense because they don't think there's a different way. As I think about that now, was there an intensity that drove you to some of that achievement, some of that identity, some of that value?
Well, isn't it interesting? Because I think intensity by itself could be a good thing.
Yeah.
Like if you're intense around building your marriage,
Yeah.
or parenting your children,
Yeah.
or discipling other people, or sharing the gospel. Like what I mean, there's ways to be intense that are really actually super healthy. Or working out. Not everybody has Tyler Dickerhoof sized arms. By the way, look at this guy's arms. So I actually think, Tyler, you're probably still very intense. I know you're intense because you've built some really cool things and you've led your family really well. But I think learning to channel that intensity toward things that matter. And also, I take our listeners to Matthew 18:1. There's this really interesting conversation that the disciples have with Jesus. And they basically ask Jesus, like, who's the greatest,
Yeah.
And you know this passage, right? But it's like, Jesus, who's the greatest, How to become the greatest? And this is kind of a fun conversation to have with kids, by the way. Say to the kids, like, hey, who do you think the GOAT is? And you just ask it just like that, kind of vague and abstract. Like, who's the GOAT?
Yeah.
And kids, they don't even ask like what context. They just start shouting names.
Yeah.
Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Like, well, I didn't even say football, but sure, or Patrick Mahomes or Steph Curry, whatever. And then you kind of, okay, hey, pause. Who did Jesus say the GOAT was? And then it gets even more hilarious, right? And they're like, well, I think it was Jesus or God, or I don't, and they just said hilarious, Apostle Paul, or it was Noah because he built the ark, whatever. Anyway, they don't know, right? Is the point. Most of them, unless they read Matthew 18:1. And when the disciples have this conversation with Jesus, Jesus responds, the passage, Tyler, he brings this child over. It says he places a child among them. And he says, truly, unless you change and become like this child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And it kind of gets back to Matthew 16:24, right? When he says, like, if you're going to follow me, you got to deny yourself. So what Jesus is saying is, hey, you can live a passionate, intense life. I just want you to do it with the humility of a child. I want you to realize that, like, hey, apart from me, you don't have any real power. Like, because a child is helpless, right? Like, Tyler, your kids, my kids, they're helpless. They don't, our little guy, Mac, he's a year and a half old. He literally wouldn't survive if we didn't provide for
I
him.
wish my
And God
16 and 17 and 14-year-old at moments were a little bit more helpful. But that's on me, not them. That's on me.
Independent, right?
Yeah.
They might struggle in other ways, though.
But trust me, it's no lack of parenting, right?
So, like, the point is, we need the Lord, and I think God's saying, I want you to be intense. I want you to be passionate. I just want you to do it with the right heart posture and the humility of a child that says, I'm not on the throne and God is, and I'm going to live remembering that. And people are going to know that and see that through my actions.
You make a very good point there that I want to take a moment to emphasize. There's a person in my community. We had a session one day. We were talking about this. We were talking about intensity and use the example. Intensity is like when your kids turn on the light in your bedroom in the middle of the night. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
But each of us have lights on right now. That's where you can see our faces. We have lights on and they're inappropriate. They're in the right place. If these lights were turned on in the middle of the night, 3 a.m, both of us would be like, turn those off. Good God.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I've understood, to your point, what you just made. Intensity in the right place with engagement of others for others is perfectly aligned. Intensity when it's to overwhelm, outshine, kind of just burn a hole in there's no place for that. And what I've seen and what I've understood in my life, it was the armor, because that's the way I choose it. When I see people that are, performers and presenters and coaches sometimes, and I recognize it because I've had to go through that. It's like, oh, okay, your intensity is at a point where now it's an armor for your insecurity. Just choose to be more vulnerable as you have here. And I think that's what I've recognized is a revelation God has given me, because not everyone understands that.
That's good. Isn't it also interesting, Tyler, that, sometimes my ego wishes that the scripture said, God's power is made perfect in your strength. It's like, oh, I wish it was like, when I'm strong, then he's strong. It is like, no, but the scriptures actually say God's power is made perfect in your weakness. So again, it gets back to this posture of humility. And I think you lead with that, Tyler, right? It's like, hey, I can have a great life. I can have a big life. I can have an abundant life. I can make things happen. And it's okay to have success and money. It's just like, but are you going to steward that the right way? Are you going to have the right heart posture? Is there going to be a yielding in your spirit and who you are to the fact that you're not in charge and you're not in control? That's what I didn't have. And I'm still working on that. I don't know that I'll ever arrive and I'm like, oh, I got the perfect posture. I got to take up my cross every day and remember that. But it's just, I love the light analogy. Intensity can be a great thing.
as long as it's done with the right posture and the right positioning.
Like John Maxwell says, just make it better. You can give a nod here and there. That's fine, but God, use it, make it better.
Yes. Well
You
said.
just said something there that I had in part of my notes, and I want to hit on. You talk about this idea of you still have to bear that cross. We talk about the step down into the depths of the valley, right? Well, what safeguards do you have to keep you from getting caught in those traps again?
There's a guy in my life named Dale Mulliken who disciples me and coaches me. And, we had time this morning, actually. We just grabbed regular time, getting God's word. He asked me a lot of questions that I don't want to be asked. For someone listening, I'd say, like, who really knows you? Is there somebody in your life outside of your spouse who really knows you? Like, they really know the things that you're screwing up or the areas where you're falling short. They don't just know what you're doing. They know how you're thinking. That's like another level of like knowing someone. I remember the first time I sat down with Dale, Tyler, he was like, okay, Jordan, what are you struggling with? And I was like, oh man, I'm struggling with pride. He's like, okay, tell me. He's like, yeah, that's table stakes. Everybody struggles with pride. He's like, we're not talking about that. Like, he was kind of setting the table for like, hey buddy, if we get together, we're going to have real conversations about things that matter. And I'm not going to spend time with you unless you're willing to be real and vulnerable and raw. And so I would say that relationship, Dale's influence in my life, that sort of discipleship relationship, somebody really knowing me and holding me accountable, has probably kept me from a lot of things. The other safeguard, though, is being in God's word. And I'm not perfect there. So somebody listening, like, I fall short a lot. I'm not as consistent as I could be or should be. But man, life is different when you're drinking from God's word. It just is. Like so many times God's word has either convicted me or drawn me in. And again, it's been a major safeguard in my life. Ashley and I do marriage coaching once a month, 90 minutes with another couple called Jill and Mark Savage. And we don't do marriage coaching because something's like wrong. I mean, we have all kinds of stuff that we're working on, but we just do marriage coaching because we want to stay healthy, And so that's been a safeguard, like a safe place that's structured where we have to be reasonable with each other and we get to talk things out with another couple who loves Jesus, knows the scriptures. And so, man, it's been a great form of accountability for me. I have to listen to my wife. I have to be discerning.
That's a good advice to anyone, all right? Self included.
Okay, it's so crazy though, right, Tyler? Because so back to safeguard. When you place yourself, this sounds, but this just reveals our humanness, or maybe this just reveals my humanness. When you put yourself in front of others, when it's not just you and your spouse, and you don't just get to be emotional or wall somebody off, you have to be a reasonable, decent human and listen, and be decent.
I was sharing with you earlier that it's been a rough couple of days, and one of them I struggle with. Like when I told you my rubber band gets tight and all of a sudden I explode, and that means I was raised in a football linebacker, Germanic, like, my dad yell and it's like, and he's a pretty lovable guy. He's this big teddy bear and I can be, but when it snaps, like, there's veins popping out and red everywhere. And that's, what I struggle with. And my wife very, very, very much in a family meeting made that apparent to everyone last night. And it's a struggle.
Yeah, it is. And anybody who can't identify with that, probably either maybe you're not married or you, it's just, that's just part of marriage. So the point is, back to safeguards is like, man, get yourself to a place. I had to get myself to a place where I could have safe conversation. We both have to listen. We have to hear each other. There's some other people pressing in who are listening and helping us. Being discipled, I think being discipled and also discipling someone, I think, is a safeguard. And then being in God's word. None of those three things are perfect. There's more that I could do. But those three things right there have been a game changer in my life. And have really probably protected me from a lot of things that left to my own devices I would have done or would have stepped into.
I want to get into your book. I'm going to tie it to this, but I want to get into your book. And I wrote this last night as I read it. Encouragement of others is hollow without self-encouragement. So when we just finished up the safeguards, how much is self-encouragement a safeguard?
Man, I think it's really hard to give someone something that you don't have, just in general, right? Like in life, like you can't give people money that you don't have. You can't give them relationships that you don't have. You can't give them encouragement that you don't have. And so, yeah, I think you got to protect yourself, invest in yourself. I think there's a lot of ways to encourage. I mean, one of the arts of this book is the art of self-encouragement. Yeah. And so we talk about the power of spoken word. We talk about the power of God's word. We talk about the power of environment. But it is a choice to encourage yourself. I love our friend John Gordon says, I'm not positive because life is easy. I'm positive because life is difficult. And so this isn't Pollyanna positive. I'm not saying like, oh, just, believe better about yourself or write down your I am statements. Like, I think it's a lot of things. I think this is a daily choice. It's like, man, I'm going to choose to see the glass half full. I'm going to be grateful for what I have. I think 3 of the best questions in life are, what am I proud of? What am I grateful for? And what am I excited about? If we're to answer those questions continuously and repeatedly, we'll find that hey, there's a lot of things to be encouraged about, even if your circumstances aren't ideal. The Apostle Paul wrote the most encouraging book in the Bible, the book of Philippians. My opinion is the most encouraging book in the Bible. That's debatable, but it's certainly an encouraging book. And he wrote it from a prison cell. He couldn't even stand in that cell. And yet he's talking about all that he has to be grateful for. And so I do believe, Tyler, it is a choice to be in the mode of self-encouragement, and we have to work at it. And sometimes working at it is difficult.
I love, have those noted from the book, and also you sharing them, the questions. What accomplishments are you proud of? What are you grateful for? What are you excited about? I think those are great questions to journal and every day. That's something that can really help you. One of the other, I guess, thoughts that I pulled out of reading the book, and I wrote this, and I'd love for you, again, just give me your feedback. Encouragement based on achievement is like an appetizer. It can easily get the meal started, but will lead to a disappointing evening if that's the focus.
We spend a lot of time thinking about, talking about character encouragement, this idea that we fall in love with what people do instead of falling in love with who they are. Athletes especially struggle with this. There's a story in the book about an athlete that we coached, still coach. I actually just had a call with him today. He's an amazing human. I mean, humble, gifted, big-hearted, just an incredible person, one of the most incredible people I've ever known. And he's also a really talented football player. And so he calls me like 2 years ago, and he's like, hey, big guy. He calls me a big guy. Hey, big guy, which is funny because I'm a small guy. He's a big guy. He's like, man, I'm kind of sideways. Like I did this thing that I shouldn't have done. I bumped into this article. He's like, I'm usually really good about staying off of social media, but somehow he bumped into this article that was about him. And it was a really short article. It was like a paragraph, but it was really about his performance, and it was impacting the way that he viewed himself. And he's like, basically, this sports analyst says that I'm not the same guy anymore. Like I don't have the same skip in my step, and I'm overpaid and whatever. And it wasn't just affecting his ability to play football. It was like legitimately affecting his identity, like the way that he saw himself. I said, man, can I give you some feedback? Like, are you okay if I just speak into that? And he's like, sure. That's why I'm calling. Like, I'm just really sideways. I've been sideways the last couple of days. I was like, okay, well, first off, you're a great football player. So let's acknowledge that. The do matters, the results, the do matters, what he's done. It does matter. I said, you're a 5-time Pro Bowler. You're a former first-round draft pick, consensus All-American in college. You're on a max contract. You've been a captain of 2 different NFL teams. Like, you're one of the best to ever do it at your position. Like, hey, man, you're a really, really good football player. And I'm proud of you for that. Like, regardless of what happens, I don't know. Are you the same? Dude, I don't know. You're a great football. You're still one of the best football players in the league at your position. But that's not why I'm proud of you. That's not what I see in you. I see a world-class family man. Man, you're a great husband. You're a great father. Like, man, you lead in the community. You were appointed captain to two different teams. Like, I said, Brandon, you have this intuition about you. You see, God gave you the gift of intuition. You see things in people that other people don't see. You see problems, you see issues, you see gifts, you see abilities, and like, and because you see those things, you can point them out and you can build relationships like unlike anybody I've ever seen. Like, man, you're a magnet for people. People want to be around you. They want to spend time with you. And I actually think that gift in you, who you are, has allowed you to do what you do. And yes, you're 6'5" and 310 pounds. And like, so that's true too. But I'm telling you, man, it's who you are that has set you apart. There's a lot of guys 6'5", 310 that bench press, whatever. They're not where you're at. And so bro, so the good news is none of that's changed. And it's crazy to me that you're going to let this analyst in New York City who's never met you write these 5 sentences that are then going to affect your identity. Like, what are we talking about? And I got pretty passionate. And he's like, well, I guess when you put it that way, but the point is all the encouragement that he was receiving was in his achievement. It was in the do. It wasn't in the who. And we think about that example and we go, oh yeah, I can see how that would happen to a, big time athlete. No. It happens everywhere. It happens literally all the time. Somebody has probably said to you recently, Tyler, very recently, Tyler, I don't know how you do it. You and Kelly, I mean, you have this big life. You're speaking all over the place. You wrote this book. You got this podcast. You have these events. Like, you're this good looking guy who's in shape, and it just all that you're doing, man, keep it up. And I hope there's a part of that makes you feel good, right? I hope you'd say, yeah, cool. But it wouldn't mean as much as if somebody said to you, hey, Tyler, you are one of the most sensitive, caring, big-hearted people that I know. Your ability to like draw near to people and elevate them and care for them. You're one of the most prepared people that I know. Like, dude, you live a prepared life. You don't even have to be prepared because you live a prepared life. You have the gift of communication and connection. You're one of the top communicators I've ever spent time with. You're a great question asker, one of the best listeners. Like, God gave you the gift of connection and communication and charisma. And you have decided to steward those gifts in ways that matter. And it's allowed you to do all of these things. So like, bro, just so proud of the way that you've stewarded the really unique gift, the supernatural giftedness that God has bestowed upon you to communicate and connect with other humans. You have gifts that so few people have. And I'm just proud of the way that you've carried those gifts. That's who Tyler Dickerhoof is. Tyler did not come out of the womb and God said, this is my next podcast host. No, he just said, hey, this little child, this baby Tyler, I'm gonna bless him with the ability to connect and communicate and build amazing relationships. And then you had to make a decision. I'm gonna steward those gifts to the best of my ability. And brother, you've done that.
My newsletter goes out every Friday. And I had a buddy that one of the guys that he's part of a Wednesday group. We get together, have coffee. There's 5 of us. We've termed it Wednesday Consulting. And so we have this meeting, and it's about life. At times we've gone through books, at times we've gone through Bible study. It's just different things in the season. And like I said, we've called it Wednesday Consulting, and we have finance guys. We have a amazing artist, marketing, an operations engineer, then myself. And he wrote me this morning. He said, hey, this week's newsletter was a good one. And I responded back, truthfully, you don't know how much that means. Been a rough few days. And, as part of someone that's an encourager, how often do you get notes like that? And you're like, man, even though I'm an encourager, you don't realize how much that means because we all go through stuff.
Bro, and what's funny is, maybe what's interesting is there's kind of the forgotten about crowd. Like I think you see this organizationally with like CEOs and the COOs because they spend all of their life like giving and worrying about everybody else. And you're kind of that way too, right? Where like you're leading in all these different areas of life. And so it can become easy at times to feel it's like, man, you're pouring that out for everybody else. And I think sometimes people just assume it's like, well, of course Tyler's encouraged. Like, kidding me? He's got these books and a podcast and this business and an amazing family. And it's like, yeah, man, I wish it is a good reminder. When I heard that, I'm like, it's a good reminder. Like that I need to be taking time to encourage the Tylers of the world? Because it's easy to assume,
I mean,
you know?
and I think,
But tell me, can you tell me about the, and you don't have to share anything you don't want to share, but
no.
the past few days, is there?
Oh, I mean, so I have an event coming up the end of July, and I've had events before, and the biggest concern now, I mean, we're, I think 6.5 weeks away, something like that, 6 weeks away. Dude, we need to sell a lot of tickets, like a lot of tickets, and it's just kind of like, all right. There's a part of me that knows this is for God to show up. This is going to be great. I need to just be diligent. I need to continue to do. And yet it doesn't release the tension. Even at the recording of this podcast, we'll have 5 days before the event. Tickets probably still be available. And part of that, it's just it's not about me. I don't care if people show up for me. It's our friends, our friends, our friends, our mentors that I feel like if I don't get people there, I dishonor them. I want people to come and see Graham because he deserves it. I want people to come hear Jake because he deserves it. I want people to come hear Katie because she deserves it. And I want people to come hear John because he's impacted my life so much that he deserves and people deserve. And so that's what, the financial part of it, we'll figure it out. But I just, there's this hole in me. There's this hole in me that if they're not honored, that means I've failed.
Let me speak this over you. Whether there's 10 people or 50 people, like whatever, the 100 people, I don't know what the goals and targets.
120, small little intimate event.
Okay. Yep. So just remember this. Whatever happens, the more that you can just authentically own that situation, because like they'll root for you and want you to win. So like, let's say it was 25 people showed up to this event. It's still going to be a great event.
Yeah.
You're going to impact the heck out of 25 people. And Mike Foster taught me this. So Mike, do you know Mike Foster?
I had him on podcast. Yeah.
Great dude.
Yeah.
So Mike had this one post about an event that he did where like, I don't know if you saw the post. Honestly, it's one of the best posts I've ever seen on social media.
I think it was one of his, I think I remember. Go ahead, please.
Remember? Okay. So he had this event and nobody showed up. He had 0 people. It was literally 0. And he made this like really vulnerable, authentic post about all of his expectations and all the time and the energy. And like, he felt like he led a bunch of people. Dude, it was I like fell in love with him when I read this post. I'm like, dude, I love you, your authenticity, I'm rooting for you. I want you to win. Like, because again, there's just something like if you were even just to own even if the event goes really well and it's a packed house and 120 and just, it's like, hey guys, 6 weeks ago, this is how I felt. Like, because so many times when you're the host, you feel the pressure to be like, man, this is just awesome. And it's just like, we got it rocking. And anyway, you already know all this, but I'm just saying it's going to be.
And I think that's the difference. And, as you share that, if it was just me, I've been there. In our network marketing business, man, we've had events where like few, if no one shows up. I would imagine in your, days with Northwest, I mean, you've had those events. I get that.
Yes,
that doesn't faze me. I've been through that. It's more of I've, really gone to bat to bring people to come to this event. One, because they've impacted my life and I know how great they are. And that's where it's more of like, oh, if this doesn't happen for them, that's what eats at me.
I love that you feel the responsibility, that you don't take that lightly. And at the same time, I know every one of those people that like, dude, first off, and maybe this is I just say it. It ain't changing anybody's opinion or perspective on you and or the event. I'm not even sure it matters. Like if as a speaker, whether it was 50 people or 100 people, I don't. I'm like, whatever. Who cares?
No, I get that.
It's not like it's 5,000 people and you're gonna have 50. Okay, that would be different. Because I'd be like, I thought it was 5,000 and 50. Like, that's a big gap. It just ain't gonna matter. It's an intimate event either way. It's just gonna be intimate with 50 or intimate with 100. Who cares?
Yeah. True. But so that has had me and it's been this like growing like tension. And,
Yeah.
couple that with normal family stuff. I mean, you're a dad of 4, your girls are getting older where, that's a challenge. And, that spills into life, and then it spills into the relationship with my wife. And it's just like, I mentioned this to my team yesterday. I mentioned my producer, Alex, and this is something I've realized. There are times in life, and I recognize it, where my rubber band gets pulled tight. Pulled tight. I do not know what's going on with these graphics. Pulled tight.
There's fireworks.
I don't know. It's something new. It's great. It's pulled tight,
Amazing.
and I can recognize before it explodes. Just like those graphics. It's like something new.
Dude, it's like you're doing it on purpose. Explodes. Boom.
And so I can recognize I'm there, and it's like, okay, I got to take it off of me. And so this.
Well, God's gonna provide and show up, and you're gonna have everything that you need. And hey, the word says, "He who refreshes others will be refreshed." And so it's like, dude, you're taking time to encourage me and encourage others and be a blessing. And like Katie, Jake, John, like they're all. I mean, dude, they're gonna be so cared for, supported, encouraged. You're gonna roll out the red carpet, like, dude, you're God's gonna show up for you because you're showing up for others.
That's my prayer and faith.
Receive it. Yeah. As well, it's just true.
Years ago, I had this moment and recognized the power of belief. And I realized that belief is a superpower. Belief in yourself, and you can accomplish anything. Belief in others, you can help them and encourage them to accomplish what they never thought possible. You just shared the story about Brandon. You gave an example as well, talking about me. That power of belief. Do you think really that's what encouragement is all about?
Yes. Yes. I think it's transferring belief into another person. Again, John Gordon says encouragement's a transfer of energy and belief. Zig Ziglar said that sometimes you have to believe in another person before they'll believe in themselves. And actually, everyone has done that for us before we could believe in ourselves. Like, think about it. Before you played the game of basketball or any sport, before you learned to walk, before you learned to ride a bike, before you learned to write, before you learned to read, somebody in your life said, you can do this. And they either said it directly or indirectly, but somebody actually had to believe in you before you could believe in yourself. And yes, some of us have been far more fortunate to be in environments with, able parents and in a great school system. But even the most unfortunate of people have probably bumped into some folks who've said, I believe in you and I see something in you. And if you go back to the most encouraging conversations that you've ever had, back to what we just talked about, Tyler, somebody didn't believe in what you did. They weren't like, you are, the most encouraging conversation was not when, somebody said to you, Tyler, you have the fattest steers. You have the best looking steers I've ever, just look at these steers you're raising. Like, no, man, it's like, again, it's about your ability. It's about your character. It's about your gifts. And somebody took time to believe in those gifts such that you could steward them the right way. So, yes, believe in the power of belief.
Who, in your darkest times, you share a story in the book, The Art of Encouragement, how there's a gentleman that reached out because he believed in you. How much, when you think about interacting with people, like you just shared the story about Brandon, how much do you reflect back and say, hey, I do this because he did that for me?
Well, the foundation of this book is love. And sometimes we hear that and we're like, like what? Like love, it's like, that's a little mushy, warm and fuzzy, like loving people. Hey, first off, Jesus loved people and he changed the world. And so the highest form of encouragement is love. And I think if we're going to love people well, Tyler, it means that we see the good. We point out the good. One of my favorite questions is, what does love require of me? What does love require of me? And again, people say, oh, that's a warm and fuzzy question. No, that's the question that changed the world. But we love because he loved us first. But Jesus loved me first, therefore I can love other people. So actually it's biblical that you would give something to somebody else that that somebody gave to you. And so Tim was radically generous with me. Tim taught me the art of like radical generosity, the art of true encouragement, depositing belief. So he modeled that for me. And so, yeah, I definitely feel a responsibility to pass that on. That was a gift. He gave it to me. And my job is, I got to do something with that gift.
As we wrap up here, and I think about the time we've spent and grateful for it, and grateful for your friendship and encouragement. When you think about, again, we reflected a little bit about this, that there's a lot of people in our lives that need encouragement, right? I think you shared in the book, and it's been referenced, John Maxwell and his dad's like, oh, who needs encouragement? It's like, are they breathing? Right? And I think that's true. Who are the hardest people to encourage, and how do you do it?
I was having a conversation with a client of ours, runs a big organization, big financial firm, and they have a summer internship program. And we're having a small conversation about encouragement, kind of a side conversation with a few other leaders. And he's like, man, I'm struggling. These interns, they can't even walk and chew bubble gum, and they show up late and they're screwing stuff up. And like, we should just shut the whole program down. And he was sort of joking, but he's like, you really want me to encourage these guys? Like, I didn't know why we hired them. Like, how am I supposed to encourage them? They're not doing anything. He's like, these people are really hard to encourage. Again, I think you have to look past who somebody is to see who they could become. I'm not perfect at that. In fact, I really struggle with that. But a leader's job is to look past who someone is to see who they could become. Like, I want to see the potential in someone in spite of the ways that they fall short, or the problems that they have, or the issues that they have, because we all have issues. We all have things that we do or don't do that get in our way. But I just said to him in that moment, I'm like, don't you have an intern that like has the gift of humor? Like, there's got to be somebody who like is hilarious or really fun to be around. Like, couldn't you encourage them in that? Couldn't you say like, hey, a gift that you have that nobody else has is the gift of humor. You make people laugh. You bring levity to situations. Or maybe it's the gift of curiosity. Hey, you have the gift of curiosity. You're one of the best question askers. I love the way that you challenge the status quo. Thank you for your gift of curiosity. That's in you and that's unique to you. So yeah, man, we're all around challenging people. But they're still made in God's image, and they still have some gifts. And as long as that's the case, as long as they're made in God's image, which is everyone, and as long as they have gifts, which is everyone, then we have reason to encourage them.
Love it.
And actually, I think some of those people need encouragement more than anybody else. They're frustrating for a reason. Yeah. And it's probably because they feel insecure, or they don't love where they're at in life, or they're going through something. And so all the more reason to come alongside of them.
Jordan, where can people learn more about their book, you, all those good things?
Yeah, there's a landing page for the book. It's the artoфencouragementbook.com. So the artoфencouragementbook.com. It's actually discounted currently, and then we're doing a live webinar with some other thought leaders. And so if you buy the book, you get access to the webinar. Hey, go buy the book. We'd love that. But also send me a message. If I can be of service, Tyler, to somebody listening, send me a DM on Instagram or a private message on LinkedIn. I try to respond to all those messages. And if I can be of service or add some value, encourage you, if you're listening, wherever today might find you, I'd love to be helpful.
And thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate your friendship and your encouragement. Thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. I appreciate you taking time today to learn more about Jordan. I ask you to subscribe on YouTube, and wherever you listen to this podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, take time to rate and review the episode so that way people can discover more impactful leaders like Jordan. So thank you for being here. And until next time, choose to lead with impact.